Subway is one of the most well-known submarine sandwich chains of all time.
Oh, dude, look, it's that commercial with the guy that lost 400 pounds eating at Subway sandwiches.
And for a while, they were cruising along like a train. But somewhere along the way, the ride got a little bumpy, and eventually the franchise all but derailed. So, what happened? Well, today we're going to take a look at everything that went wrong with Subway. But before we get started, be sure to subscribe to the Weird History Food channel. After that, please leave a comment and let us know what other fast food chains you would like to hear about. Okay, 1 foot-long Weird History sandwich coming right up. The story of Subway starts in 1965, when a 17-year-old Fred DeLuca discovered he didn't have the money to attend college and medical school as he had planned. Seeking help, he reached out to a family friend named Peter Buck, who was a nuclear physicist and not the REM guitarist of the same name. Buck's advice to DeLuca was to pay for his higher education by opening a sandwich shop. For whatever reason, Buck was so adamant about his plan, he drove DeLuca all the way from Connecticut to Maine, just to show him one particular sandwich shop he felt could serve as an inspiration. He even loaned DeLuca $1,000 to get started and became his business partner in a Bridgeport, Connecticut Subway sandwich shop that opened just 2 weeks later. And that shop was called Pete's Drive-In Super Submarines. His restaurant had a subtitle, like a Marvel movie. The shop sold over 300 sandwiches on its first day, which was promising, but the first few years would turn out to be pretty difficult. One problem was that name, which they often abbreviated to Pete's Submarines, because nobody's going to say all of those words just to answer the phone at a deli. However, DeLuca's thick New York accent made listeners think he was saying Pizza Marines in the shop's radio ads, which was torpedoing business. Rather than re-recording the ad, DeLuca chose to change the name of the shop, and in 1968 it became Subway. Wait, why not change it to Pizza Marines? What might have been. The name change must have helped because DeLuca and Buck opened a second location in 1966, and by 1974, they had expanded their operation to 16 restaurants scattered around Connecticut. Their goal was to have twice that many shops, so the pair agreed to start franchising their business model, like McDonald's. And like McDonald's, Subway began to grow exponentially. The first West Coast location opened in Fresno, California in 1978. The first international location in Bahrain in 1984, the first Canadian location in 1986, and the first UK location in 1996. At the same time, the chain began to slowly expand their menu. In 1975, they introduced the classic BMT, considered their flagship sandwich. Incidentally, the BMT is named after the Brooklyn-Manhattan Transit subway system that once serviced those parts of New York. It does not stand for biggest, meatiest, tastiest, except in our hearts. Subway also introduced their 6-inch sub in the 1970s. Originally known as Snacks, spelled S-N-A-K-S, the name was dropped after they realized no one knew what the hell a snack was. Over the decades, Subway continued to expand beyond anyone's expectations. And by 2017, the company had almost 45,000 restaurants worldwide. To put that in context, McDonald's had almost 7,000 less, and Starbucks had over 16,000 less. How did Subway become such a monster? Well, it was mostly thanks to the success of a single spokesman. Jared Scott Fogle graduated from college in 2000 and worked briefly as a revenue manager at an airline. In 1999, a former roommate of Fogle's published an article in the Indiana Daily Student detailing how Fogle lost 245 pounds through a strict regimen of exercise and a diet of Subway sandwiches. Fogle's diet entailed eating a small turkey sub, a large veggie sub, a bag of chips, and a Diet Coke. Previously, he consumed over 10,000 calories a day, but the Subway diet lowered his daily intake to 2,000 calories, and, with the additional exercise, the weight came off. The article about Jared caught the attention of a Chicago Subway franchisee who sent it in to the area's corporate advertising agency. And on January 1st, 2000, Subway aired the first commercial to introduce Jared and recount his story to the public. That commercial, which was considered something of a test, was surprisingly candid about Fogle's results, warning viewers that what worked for him might not work for everyone. and stressing the contribution regular exercise had made to his weight loss. Despite of, or perhaps because of, that honesty, the spot was a huge success, and more would follow. Fogel began making personal appearances at Subways all over the U.S., where he would discuss his diet and help drum up business. Subway eventually went all in on Fogel, who would become known simply by his first name as Subway's official spokesman. Jared would remain a constant presence in Subway ads for the next 8 years, only being de-emphasized in 2008 after the company decided to refocus their marketing around the $5 footlong promotion they were running at the time. Not that they got rid of Jared. Up until 2013, he still appeared in the occasional commercial and made speeches on the company's behalf. It was a mutually beneficial relationship. Jared became a minor international celebrity and made millions of dollars. And according to Subway, their revenue tripled during the time he was spokesman. The chain became bigger than it had ever been, surpassing even McDonald's to become the largest fast food chain in the world in 2010. So why was Jared so successful? Well, during the late 90s and early aughts, the U.S. was going through a health food craze, and Jared's story, as well as his easygoing, regular Joe personality, touched a nerve. People could see themselves in Jared, a regular person who had genuinely struggled with his weight more than they ever could in any paid actor or hamburger clown. But all that goodwill was about to evaporate. On July 7, 2015, the FBI, along with the Indiana State Police, raided Fogel's home in Zionsville, Indiana, and arrested him on charges of receiving and distributing CSAM, or pornographic material involving children. The arrest was the result of an 8-year investigation, a fact that shocked Jared's supporters and his employers at Subway. As early as 2007, Jared was on the authorities' radar after Florida-based journalist and radio host Rochelle Herman alerted local police Jared had made lewd comments to her about underage girls. She recorded some of those comments and turned them over to the FBI, along with a string of incriminating texts he had also sent her. Over the next 4 years, Herman would secretly record Fogel as part of a federal investigation. Although the recordings contained several claims of criminal wrongdoings, investigators felt they needed more substantive evidence to make a case against Fogel. That evidence finally came when a raid in an unrelated case turned up computers that had traded illegal material with Fogel. After his arrest, authorities uncovered incriminating texts Fogel had sent to his girlfriend, a Subway franchisee named Cindy Mills, in which he bragged about sleeping with underage girls and asked Mills to set him up on a date with her teenage cousin. That's pretty hard to explain, Jared. The once beloved Fogel would ultimately plead guilty to distribution and receipt of CSAM, as well as engaging in illicit sexual conduct with a minor. He would be sentenced to almost 16 years in prison, more than the prosecutors even asked for, with the judge describing his level of offense as severe. After the incident first broke, Subway immediately terminated their relationship with Fogel and pulled all references to him off of their website. But by that point, Jared was as synonymous with Subway as Ronald McDonald was with McDonald's, and the fallout for their business was devastating. Jared might have been Subway's biggest problem, but he was far from their only problem. In September of 1999, for example, 32 Subway customers contracted hepatitis A after being served contaminated food at 2 separate locations. One 6-year-old boy even wound up needing a liver transplant. An investigation would later place the blame squarely on the staff, who didn't bother to wash their hands or wear gloves when preparing food. The victims would eventually file a class action suit, which Subway would settle for about $1.5 million. A similar outbreak, traced to a Subway in Seattle, made the news back in 1996. And in 2015, the Arkansas Department of Health traced another outbreak to a Subway located in Morrilton, Arkansas. In 2007, a TV station in Arizona reported that Subway's giant subs weren't quite reaching their advertised length, putting them in violation of Arizona's consumer law. The company resolved to address the problem, but it popped up again in 2013 when an Australian teen went viral for showing his footlong was only 11 inches. It would eventually lead to another class action suit, which would end in a settlement that was tossed out for being worthless to consumers. The party-sized sub of disasters continued in 2017, when an investigation by Canadian TV series Marketplace showed Subway's chicken secretly contained a large amount of soy. In 2020, the Supreme Court of Ireland ruled that Subway's bread contained too much sugar to legally be considered bread. And the following year, they were sued because tests showed that, despite their advertising, their tuna might contain other species of fish. They also faced lawsuits from franchisees over misrepresenting the value of Subway shops, as well as from employees who claimed they were being underpaid. And there have been a slew of problems with false advertising claims over the difference between the amount of meat their sandwiches are advertised to contain versus the actual portion you receive in the store. In other words, Subway had been rolling the dice on a lot more than just Jared. Despite the disgrace of their former spokesman, Subway has continued to make efforts to appeal to health-conscious consumers, mostly through a marketing campaign based on the slogan, "Eat fresh, refresh. Eat fresh, refresh," which they started using in 2021. But the revelations about Jared, along with all those other problems we mentioned, certainly took their toll. Once the largest restaurant chain in the world, Subway now has roughly 8,000 less locations than it did at its peak, and has fallen into second place behind McDonald's. Maybe they should have stuck with pizza marines. So what do you think? What's your go-to Subway sandwich? Let us know in the comments below, and while you're at it, check out some of these other weird history food videos.